Imagine an intelligence that can look at a seemingly healthy medical scan today and basically tell you that you're going to develop a tumor 3 years from now.
Right.
Now imagine that exact same intelligence deciding, what you'll buy tomorrow, whether your current job will even exist next week, and ultimately kind of rewriting the rules of what it actually means to be human.
Oh, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Okay.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We're unpacking a highly condensed daily AI digest from today, April 13th, 2026. And our mission here is to just cut through all the daily noise and trace this really fascinating narrative that's hidden right beneath the surface of these sources.
Yeah, because when you look closely at the data from today's digest, you realize these aren't just, isolated events. They are all ripples from the exact same algorithmic stone, so to speak.
Yeah.
If we can connect these seemingly disparate news items into one unified picture, we actually start to understand the real trajectory of where our society is heading.
Exactly. So we are jumping right into the deep end today. The sources highlight this groundbreaking new AI model developed at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The MIT team built this system that analyzes mammogram images to enhance early cancer detection.
Mm-hmm.
But what caught my eye isn't just that it detects cancer. It's the sheer, almost unsettling precision of it. The digest notes it's spotting subtle signs of cancer that the human eye completely misses.
Right, misses entirely.
Yeah. How is that physically possible? What is the machine seeing that a highly trained doctor isn't?
Well, to understand that, we kind of have to look at how humans process visual information versus how a machine learning model does it.
Okay.
When a human radiologist looks at a mammogram, they're looking for specific, recognizable visual cues, right?
Yeah.
A shadow, a mass, maybe a distortion in the tissue that just shouldn't be there.
Right, they're looking for biology.
Exactly, they were dealing with biology. But when this MIT model looks at that exact same scan, it doesn't see biological tissue at all.
Right, really?
Yeah, it sees a massive multi-dimensional array of pixels and mathematical relationships.
Okay, I was thinking about this earlier, and the best analogy I could come up with is it's like a superpowered spell checker.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, but instead of scanning a document and finding, a misplaced comma or a typo,
Yeah.
it's scanning human tissue and finding a microscopic, life-saving anomaly.
Let's actually take that spell checker analogy and break it down a bit because it perfectly illustrates the mechanism here. How does a spell checker work?
It just compares what you wrote to a dictionary.
Right. It cross-references the sequence of letters you typed against this massive database of linguistic rules and historical text. The MIT AI is doing the exact same thing, but its language is the structural variation of millions of previous medical scans.
Wow. Millions.
Yeah. During its training phase, this neural network was fed just vast data sets of mammograms. That includes both healthy scans and, crucially, scans from patients who later developed tumors.
Oh, I see. So it essentially learned the visual vocabulary of cancer before the cancer actually formed a visible mass.
You nailed it.
Hmm.
It learned to identify these microscopic pixel density gradients and structural asymmetries that, mathematically speaking, precede a tumor by months or even years.
That's wild.
And these are variations so minute, maybe just a slight difference in contrast across like a few pixels that human biology simply cannot perceive them.
Right. Our eyes just aren't built for that.
Exactly. And think about the stamina. A human radiologist might process 50 to 100 scans a day before eye strain and, cognitive fatigue set in.
Yeah, you get tired.
The machine doesn't get tired. It scales that pattern recognition infinitely across thousands of scans a minute.
Which sounds like an absolute miracle for preventative medicine.
It really is.
But I'm reading the notes from the MIT team, and they're putting a massive asterisk next to this breakthrough.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, they explicitly emphasize that this tool is designed as a quote-unquote second opinion to assist radiologists, especially in challenging cases. They're being very cautious about positioning this as a replacement.
Well, that framing is very intentional, and it really gets to the heart of this huge current debate in modern medicine.
But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If I'm a radiologist, right, and the AI is consistently seeing things that I miss simply because of human biological limits, at what point does that second opinion effectively become the first opinion?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because if it's statistically better at spotting the pixel gradient, I mean, I'm going to stop trusting my own eyes eventually.
And you're hitting on a major psychological hurdle there. It's called automation bias. It's a really well-documented phenomenon in human-computer interaction.
Automation bias.
Yeah. If a machine is historically correct, say 99.9% of the time, human nature dictates that you will eventually start to just blindly defer to its judgment, even when it might be wrong or, hallucinating a result.
Oh, it's like blindly accepting the autocorrect on your phone.
Right.
Even when it changes your perfectly fine word into total nonsense just because the phone is usually right.
Exactly. Which is, a minor annoyance in a text message.
Yeah, but a matter of life and death at a medical clinic.
Precisely. And that is why the MIT researchers are fighting so hard to maintain this as a partnership. Because, yes, the AI is vastly superior at spotting the mathematical pattern of the disease, but it operates in a total vacuum.
What do you mean by a vacuum?
Well, it doesn't know the patient sitting in the room. It doesn't know their family history, their pain tolerance, their lifestyle, or, their personal preferences for treatment.
Right. It's just numbers to the machine.
Exactly. The ultimate goal here isn't to build a robot doctor. It is to create a synthesis, taking the machine's flawless pattern recognition and combining it with the physician's holistic, contextual understanding of the human being.
Okay, so we have this profound, life-saving partnership happening in the clinic.
Yeah.
But that exact same mechanism, feeding vast amounts of data into a neural network to find an invisible pattern, it doesn't stop at biology.
Not at all.
When you point that same algorithmic lens away from human tissue and point it at human behavior, you get a completely different picture. And that leads us to the McKinsey and Company survey detailed in today's digest.
Right. The transition from the medical clinic straight to the corporate boardroom.
And the numbers in this survey are just staggering. Over 60% of executives worldwide are currently investing heavily in AI tools for their corporations.
It's a massive shift.
But the sources indicate the entire motivation has shifted too. For a long time, AI in business was primarily an efficiency play, right? You automate the supply chain, you reduce headcount and repetitive jobs, you basically save money.
Trimming the fat, yeah.
Right. But now, the goalpost has moved to opening entirely new revenue streams. So how is the AI actually doing that?
It comes down to a concept we can call predictive revenue. Corporations are using AI-powered analytics to understand consumer behavior at a terrifyingly granular level.
Terrifyingly granular is a good way to put it.
Well, think back to the MIT model, finding the microscopic pattern in the tissue.
Yeah.
The corporate AI is finding the microscopic pattern in how you shop, what you click on, how long you linger on a specific page, and what you are statistically likely to buy next.
See, that shift in perspective changes how I view my own data. Because if they can map my biology, they can absolutely map my daily habits.
Oh, 100%. And it goes way beyond just showing you a targeted ad for shoes because you looked at shoes yesterday.
Right, the old retargeting ads.
Exactly, we're way past that. These machine learning models are analyzing complex intersections of data.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, let's say you bought a specific brand of premium sunscreen and you recently checked the weather forecast for Hawaii on your phone.
Okay.
And then the AI analyzing your digital calendar sees a 1-week gap next month. The algorithm predicts the exact psychological moment you are most primed to book a vacation, and suddenly, boom, you get a highly customized offer for a resort in Maui.
Wow. That's almost reading your mind.
Yeah. It practically is. It has shifted from being a back-office efficiency tool that saves pennies to a front-office engine that practically generates demand out of thin air.
Okay, but the McKinsey report also dives into the internal impact on companies.
Yeah, the workforce side of things.
Right. They note that AI is taking over massive amounts of employee scheduling, logistics, and just automated data processing. And the corporate justification for this, the silver lining they're aggressively selling to their workforce, is that this frees up employees from the mundane busy work.
The whole fostering innovation angle.
Yes. Allowing them to focus on more strategic tasks, thereby fostering innovation and creativity.
That is definitely the optimistic promise that executives are leading with, yes.
I have to push back on this corporate optimism, though. I mean, I'm looking at the reality of the modern workforce here.
Let's hear it.
If your entire job for the last 10 years has been data processing, spreadsheet management, running logistical reports,
yeah,
are you realistically ready to just flip a switch and go into pure, quote-unquote, strategic innovation mode at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday?
That is an incredibly valid pushback. And it highlights the massive friction of this corporate transition right now. You cannot simply mandate creativity just by removing the busy work.
Right. It doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. What the McKinsey survey is quietly acknowledging underneath all that optimistic data is a profound disruption in the psychological contract of work.
The psychological contract. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, traditionally, you are hired for a specific skill set. You process the data, you get the paycheck. That's the contract.
Simple enough.
But if an algorithm suddenly processes the data in 5 seconds, your core utility to the company vanishes overnight.
Oh, man.
The executives say, great, now you can innovate. But if you haven't been trained to innovate, you don't feel liberated. You feel alienated.
You feel obsolete.
Exactly. You feel obsolete. The report cautions that deploying these tools so quickly creates a precarious tightrope walk. You have the potential for immense predictive profit on one side and the unchecked risk of a completely disenfranchised workforce on the other.
And the risks they worried about aren't just internal employee morale, right?
Yeah.
The digest specifically notes massive corporate liability.
Oh, absolutely. The financial stakes are huge.
Because if your hyper-targeted predictive algorithm suddenly decides to market a product in a way that is mathematically optimal but, socially discriminatory,
Yes.
or if the AI hallucinating data ruins a multi-million-dollar client relationship, the company's entirely on the hook for that.
Which is exactly why walking a tightrope usually requires a safety net. The sheer speed of this corporate adoption and the massive liabilities associated with it are triggering the urgent, coordinated response we see in the next part of our sources.
Yeah, it really feels like society is scrambling to write the rule book before the game gets entirely out of hand.
That's a good way to put it.
So the digest details a brand new initiative by a coalition of major tech companies and academic institutions. They are attempting to build a global ethical framework for AI development.
It's a direct response to those exact concerns over AI biases, data privacy, and potential misuse that the McKinsey executives are losing sleep over.
Right. Their stated goals are transparency, fairness, and accountability aligned with societal values.
And they're planning to release a comprehensive set of guidelines and best practices later this year to serve as a worldwide benchmark for developers.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that. The sources talk a lot about fairness and avoiding algorithmic bias.
Right.
And I hear algorithmic bias thrown around in the news constantly. But for the listener trying to wrap their head around this, can you give me a concrete, like on 5 breakdown of how a math equation can actually be biased?
Sure.
I mean, math is just numbers, right? How can numbers be prejudiced?
It is a great question because we tend to think of computers as perfectly objective, but the bias doesn't come from the math itself. It comes from the data we feed into the math.
The training data.
Exactly. Let's use a hiring algorithm as an example. Suppose a company builds an AI to scan resumes and find the best candidates.
Okay.
To train the AI, they feed it the resumes of every successful employee the company has hired over the last 20 years.
Well, that makes logical sense. You want the machine to look for the patterns of success.
Exactly. But what if, historically, that company had a human bias and primarily hired men for executive roles?
Ah, I see where this is going.
Right. The AI doesn't understand gender politics or social equity. It just looks at the data and mathematically concludes, aha, the pattern of success correlates highly with being male.
Oh, wow. So it just naturally penalizes anyone who isn't.
Exactly. It silently starts filtering out female applicants. The math is working perfectly, optimizing for the historical pattern it was given. That is algorithmic bias. It's basically human prejudice, laundered through mathematics and presented as objective truth.
Which makes this coalition's goal of aligning AI with quote-unquote societal values incredibly complicated.
Extremely.
When I read that phrase in the digest, my immediate thought was, whose values are we actually talking about here?
Yes.
Because if this is a global coalition of tech companies primarily driven by profit, mixed with, a few academic institutions,
Yeah.
how do they possibly agree on a universal standard of fairness?
That's tough.
Fairness in Silicon Valley might look fundamentally different from fairness in Tokyo or fairness in a rural community in the global south.
You are pointing directly at what computer scientists call the alignment problem.
Alignment problem.
Right. How do we translate complex subjective human values into rigid computer code?
Yeah, how do you even code that?
Well, you have to decide what fairness means first. Is fairness defined mathematically, meaning equal outcomes for everyone regardless of input?
Okay.
Or is it defined procedurally, meaning equal rules for everyone even if the outcomes vary wildly?
Right, there's no global consensus on that.
Exactly. What this coalition is really attempting to do, underneath all the high-minded academic language, is fight a desperate battle for public trust.
Ah, because without trust, the underlying economics of this entire technological shift fall apart completely.
That is the crucial takeaway. The ethical framework isn't just a philosophical exercise for these tech giants. It is an absolute economic necessity.
That makes a lot of sense.
Think about the MIT mammogram AI we discussed earlier. If the public doesn't inherently trust that the medical algorithm is unbiased and rigorously tested, patients will simply refuse the treatment.
Right.
If everyday consumers don't trust that the corporate AI is protecting their data privacy, they will abandon the platform, and those shiny new predictive revenue streams dry up instantly.
So it's almost like the tech companies are realizing they have to aggressively regulate themselves, establishing these public benchmarks and safety guidelines before the public completely turns on them.
Or before global governments step in with a heavy legislative hammer and shut down their progress altogether.
Oh, we did.
They want to be able to point to this framework and say, look,
We have a system. We are being responsible stewards of the technology. But the actual enforcement of that framework and the cultural battle over whose specific values it truly represents, that will likely be the defining geopolitical conflict of the next decade.
Wow. So what does this all mean when we take these incredibly rigid attempts at global rulemaking and apply them to something fundamentally, beautifully human?
It gets messy.
That is the fascinating paradox hiding in the final section of today's digest. While academics and tech giants are locked in conference rooms, desperately trying to build logical boundaries and rules to govern AI,
The technology itself is simultaneously breaking boundaries in the most subjective, rule-breaking arena of all, human art.
exactly, the transition from the logical to the purely subjective.
Yeah.
The digest covers the launch of a new generative text-to-image AI platform called Artistry. According to the sources, it creates stunning, completely unique digital masterpieces from simple text descriptions.
It's really wild to see in action. You just type in a phrase, a concept, or a feeling, and the advanced generative model transforms it into a visual piece of art in seconds.
Unbelievable speeds, yeah.
Predictably, this has sparked a massive debate about the nature of creativity itself. Is this AI a threat to traditional art forms? Or is it a powerful new tool for expression?
Well, to understand the intensity of that debate, we really have to look at how a generative model actually creates an image. It isn't just searching the internet for a picture that matches your text.
Right, it's not just a Google image search.
It is
Yeah.
entirely different. Generative AI operates in something called a latent space.
Latent space, okay.
Think of it as a massive, multidimensional mathematical map of every concept humans have ever visualized and uploaded to the internet.
Okay, I'm following.
When you type in the prompt, say, a sunset over a futuristic city painted in watercolors,
right,
the AI starts with a screen of pure visual static, just random noise.
Like an old TV.
Exactly like that. Then, step by step, it mathematically predicts the arrangement of pixels that represent the concept of a sunset, the concept of a city, and the concept of watercolors.
Oh, wow.
It slowly refines that static until the image emerges. It is synthesizing millions of past data points to generate something that has never existed before.
I've been wrestling with this concept, and I want to bounce an analogy off you to see if it holds up.
Go for it.
Okay, when you sit down and use a platform like Artistry, what is your actual role as a human being?
Okay.
Are you acting like a wealthy patron of the arts, like a pope commissioning Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel, where you have the grand idea, but you are hiring a master to do all the actual hard work, brushstrokes, and execution?
Right.
Or is the AI just a highly advanced automated paintbrush that anyone can learn to swing?
That's a great question. To build on your paintbrush analogy, what makes this technology so disruptive is that the answer depends entirely on the intention and the skill of the user. Well, if you just type, "Make me a pretty picture of a sunset," and accept the very first image the algorithm spits out, then you are absolutely the patron. You outsource the creativity to the machine.
Right, you barely did anything.
But if you understand the latent space, if you spend hours refining the prompt, adjusting the mathematical weights of certain words, iterated on dozens of generations,
Okay.
and then maybe merging the final output with your own digital editing techniques,
Oh.
then the AI becomes the brush.
I see.
The prompt is your brushstroke and the algorithm is the paint. It becomes a tool that exponentially extends your creative capacity.
But regardless of whether it's a patron or a paintbrush, It fundamentally threatens the livelihood of the person who spent 20 years learning how to physically mix paint and capture the light of a sunset from scratch.
Oh, undoubtedly. It opens up exciting, democratized possibilities for casual hobbyists to express themselves, sure. But it forces professional artists to confront a terrifying new reality regarding the commercial value of their hard-earned skills.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
And if we zoom out and tie this entire deep dive together from the very first story to the last, the core theme is identical.
The radiologist, the corporate worker, and the artist.
Exactly. The MIT radiologist, the corporate employee in the McKinsey report, and the traditional artist. They are all facing the exact same mirror.
AI is forcing every single profession to brutally redefine what human expertise actually is.
Precisely. If a machine can spot the tumor with greater accuracy, if it can analyze the supply chain data in a fraction of a second, and if it can generate a masterpiece in the time it takes to type a sentence,
What's left for us?
right, what is the uniquely human element that remains valuable?
I mean, from what we've talked about, the human element is the context.
Yes. The technology is requiring us to learn how to collaborate with the algorithm rather than compete with it on a purely mechanical level.
That makes total sense.
The radiologist has to synthesize the AI's flawless pattern recognition with the patient's complex humanity. The corporate worker has to take the AI's instant data processing and apply true strategic empathy to solve a client's problem.
And the artist?
The artist has to use the AI's limitless generative power to actually say something meaningful about the human condition, rather than just, producing a pretty picture.
That is an incredibly powerful lens to view all of this through. We have covered a massive spectrum today from just a single day's digest.
We really have.
We've unpacked how a single underlying technology is acting as a life-saving medical diagnostician, a revenue-driving corporate strategist, the subject of a desperate global ethical puzzle, and a highly controversial digital artist.
And every single one of those applications is driven by the exact same mechanism, feeding vast amounts of data into a neural network to find the hidden pattern.
And so, to you listening, I want you to take a moment and reflect on where you fit into this rapidly shifting landscape. Look at your own day-to-day life and your own profession. Are you finding yourself delegating tasks to an algorithm to save time? Are you feeling the pressure to adapt your skills because a machine can suddenly do the busy work that used to define your role?
Or are you perhaps exploring new ways to be creative that you never thought were possible before this technology arrived?
Because the one thing that is absolutely certain from analyzing today's sources is that the landscape is going to continue shifting beneath our feet.
It is definitely not going to slow down.
No, it's not. And that leads me to one final thought for you to chew on as we wrap up today.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about AI models trained on vast data sets, models that can spot microscopic cancers that human doctors completely miss.
Right.
We've talked about models generating artistic masterpieces we couldn't even imagine. And they do this because they are vastly superior at recognizing complex mathematical patterns without being clouded by human fatigue.
They process the data flawlessly.
But what happens when we eventually take that exact same mechanism and we ask an AI to process vast data sets of human history, philosophy, global conflict, and law?
Oh, wow.
What happens when we ask the machine to generate the very ethical frameworks we talked about earlier? If the machine is fundamentally better at spotting patterns than us and avoiding human bias, are we eventually going to let it write its own rules?
That is a terrifying and frankly brilliant question.
Something to mull over as you go about your day. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep questioning the headlines in your feed, and remember that understanding how all these underlying pieces connect is the ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed. We will catch you next time.